Hey guys, Paul from Warrior Tactical Systems here. In this video we want to discuss sport martial arts versus reality-based training or street fighting. I got the idea for this from a Facebook discussion I saw a month or so ago on Buck Grant's page. If you're not familiar with him, he's a Muay Thai coach and a personal development coach. Extremely talented individual. I met him years ago in Virginia Beach when I was cornering fighters for the ring and he was cornering fighters for some of the events down there. Very nice guy, and we have some mutual friends. So if you get a chance, check out his podcast. It's called the Wise Warrior Podcast, and there's some really cool discussions on there. It's very good stuff, so please check that out. Now for me, I started out in the reality-based training. I kind of went to sport over the years for just the attributes, and I was always developing the reality-based part of it during all that. And now, I've gone, back to the more focus on the reality-based aspects of it because of what I do, and protection of my family is the main reason that I train at this point. So let's look at some of the pros and cons of each, though. Okay, so because there's a place for everything. Some of the pros of sport. One of the biggest things you can take from sport is the aliveness aspect of training. You have to have that in your training. And aliveness consists of timing, energy or resistance, and movement. Okay, so those three things have to be present in your training, and that's one of the things that sport do really well. Resistance is a big factor, that energy part of it. When you're dealing with resistance on a regular basis, you grow and you develop functional techniques. You can't do pretend stuff because it won't work when you're fighting against somebody who's trying back. They're not just letting you do it. So, some of the attributes that you can develop in sport, so many things, but the timing and distance are huge. You have to understand that the timing element of things and that judgment of distance that you need. But you get other things like pain tolerance, endurance, which is critical, composure, which is absolutely critical. You can develop that in your sport. If you're doing something like a mount escapes and somebody's sitting on your chest punching you in the face and you have to time that escape, that takes composure, that takes self-control to deal with those sort of things, to deal with the pain of fighting and be able to control your emotions and channel them when you need it. The other thing is character. Character can be developed by, if you have the right coach and the right student, working hard towards a goal, failing at times and having to get up and come back and do it again. All sports can develop character, and the fighting sports are no exception. And another one is humility. If you are regularly dealing with resistance and a resisting partner and someone better than you, then you know exactly what your limits are. You've butted up against them and you understand where you're truly at, rather than being able to pretend that you're Bruce Lee by faking techniques and just working through stuff without resistance. When you deal with that resistance, you can't fake it. You have to have that skill, and you really know where you're at. Okay, so some of the pros of the reality-based training is that it's a completely different knowledge base. In sport, you don't really learn about criminal violence, and criminal violence is not fair. There's weapons involved, there's multiple opponents, there's an unequal initiative. It isn't we both square off and agree to have mutual combat. It's I'm talking to my friend and I get punched in the back of the head or stabbed or whatever. So, there's a whole different knowledge base there, and the legal aspects of use of force and deadly force. The other issue is the mindset. When two people get in a ring to fight, there's not really the idea that they might die. I mean, they know they might. There's always that possibility, but there's not that intention of killing one another. Where when you're looking at criminal violence, that's very much a factor. And having that will to kill and understanding those aspects of violence are important. Being able to control yourself and understand the legal use of force, when you have to turn it off and turn it back on, when you're legally justified in using a certain level of force. In the reality base, there's also the consequences of violence, whether you win or not. Nobody really wins violence a lot of times. If you survive, that's a win. But even if you do everything right, innocent bystanders can get killed. People can die just because of the nature and the severity of circumstances. So understanding that, people can die, and those people aren't always the bad guys or good guys. It could be an innocent person. It brings a certain sense of maturity and understanding why it's so important to walk away, to de-escalate things, to have that awareness of the problems in the first place so you can avoid them. The other issue is, weapons-based training completely changes the game. Weapons, marble opponents, all those things change your game. If you enjoy Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I do, it's very good training to do, but if you use a knife while you're on the ground, the opponent has a knife, it sucks. It's a bad day. It's rough. If you have marble opponents, it's rough. It's not really where you want to be. So understanding those things, they change your entire mindset and curriculum. On the negative side of the sport, okay, one of the things is, it can become this whole ego-based hierarchical bravado crap, and you get people that don't have the character and ethics that come with that. They have all this power, but not that maturity and character to not use it. One person I know was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt at a young age, said that, that was too much power for a young kid. He was cocky and he could beat, most people. So that can be an issue that, can be a negative aspect of sport if it's not done properly. The other thing is people get used to fighting without consequences. Consequences meaning there could be a death, it could be prison after the fight. So if I go in, I go in the ring and fight, I go to train and fight all the time, it's not that big a deal for me to fight somebody on the street, and I have to understand that there's real world consequences to that, very serious consequences at times. And the other issue is if you're using sport as a self-defense tool, as your main goal is self-defense, then it lacks that reality-based knowledge that you need, that knowledge base, I should say, of legal issues, weapons, all those other things we talked about. The trap that sometimes sport people fall into is, I'll just add dirty tactics. And that can be true to an extent. Okay, I would rather have a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and teach them a few bites and gouges, and they would go a lot farther than somebody that never deals with resistance and just knows how to gouge and bite properly. But to just say, oh, you don't need to train that stuff, it'll just come to you, that's just as ridiculous as the other side of the fence where they don't train with resistance. You have to understand the timing and the place for these things. If you're used to doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you may have great sensitivity to when someone's going to pass your guard or where you could pass someone's guard, but you have no sensitivity training to someone reaching for a weapon. You were grappling on the ground, both their hands were engaged with you, and now all of a sudden they're digging at their hip or in their pocket. That's something that you have to develop a sensitivity to as well, especially for the street side of self-defense. Now, the reality-based training folks have their negatives as well, depending on where you go and what you do. Some of the things people can get to this concept of it's too deadly to practice. If you're not training with aliveness and you're not dealing with resistance, you're missing out. And there are some things that are too deadly to practice, but you can find ways around them. You can still deal with resistance, find the timing, the space where you would do a technique, the timing where you would do a technique, and maybe you don't go all the way through it, but you can get to that point. Even with firearms and edged weapons, there's ways to train in a functional way. You can use airsoft guns, projectiles, so that you can actually see what's working, what's not. You can use marking blades like a no-lie blade or the shock knives, so you have a better understanding of when things are working and when they're not. So the trap there is to just say, well, I'll just shoot them. I'll just pull my knife when I'm on the ground. I don't need to know all that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stuff. I'll just bite them and gouge them. But if you have someone who's very skilled at that game and knows the ground game well and has that sensitivity, not even somebody who's really skilled, just somebody with some good basics that you don't have, you're not going to get your gun out. When you're going for your gun, you're going to be choked unconscious before you can even clear it. So those are things that you have to look out for, and you don't want to fall into those traps. So it's folly for either side to think you don't have to train that. We'll just throw it in. That's a trap that you know, you don't want to fall into. The key is to, you know, all of this stuff is to understand your goals. There's so many good things in martial arts and so many different paths you can take in martial arts. If you're interested in culture and the art and the history, by all means, you know, train in those arts. There are great self-defense skills inside of that stuff. It's just that maybe that isn't the best thing. If your goal is criminal violence and dealing with criminal violence, then you should kind of look into that and continue to train in the art side of things as well. But make sure you have that knowledge base of that area. If your goal is for exercise and sport and fun, by all means enjoy it. It's great to do. Just understand that that's what it's for. It's a sport. It's not necessarily the ideal situation for self-defense. You can certainly learn important things that will help with self-defense, but it's not necessarily, like I said, ideal. And you know, if your goal is to focus on that, you know, reality-based training of criminal violence, then just understand that, you know, you have other areas, arts that you can look into, that you can expand your skills, that you can develop other attributes. So if you're training for life, you know, blend it all together. Some of the recommendations I have for sport folks, you know, throw the other stuff in once in a while. Go get some training in firearms. Learn a little bit about it. It will help you for self-defense. You know, it will, throwing in some of these other things, getting a little bit of training in some of these other things and throwing them in once in a while will actually improve your sport game too. It will make you work in a different way. I saw a video a few months ago of one of the Gracies. He was recommending training with a tennis ball in your hand, and it was, you know, it was amazingly talented how he can just control and dominate people even though he doesn't have the use of that hand. So that was a way to replicate some kind of injury possibly and develop your game farther. So let's say you add groin slaps to your ground game. It changes the guard up completely. You know, even when you don't have to hit to the groin, you can just slap to the side, and you know, it will make you react and change your whole game. So those little things can add to your sport. On the reality-based training side, get into a place that deals with resistance, that trains with aliveness and resistance. There are many ways to do that and still do functional and deadly techniques and using the weapons. And supplement your training with some sport, because sport develops a ton of attributes it's worth doing, you know, especially your ground game, but also some Muay Thai for, you know, your stand-up and clinch, and some wrestling for your clinch work. So tons of things you can do there, but you know, look into all of it, guys. If you're training for life, you know, don't limit yourself to one thing and identify yourself as one thing. Always, you know, be looking at what else you can learn, how you can grow and expand. Train smart and stay safe. Okay, so what do you think, guys? What are your arts that you focus on, train in? How do you feel about the sport versus reality-based or combatives type training? Please leave a comment below. Click like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to Warrior Tactical Systems. Thank you.